My name is Maria Juarez, and you're listening to In This Casa. Bienvenidos. In this podcast, I aim to memorialize and honor my husband David's memory by exploring conversations about life and what it's like in my casa, and hopefully in other casas as well. Welcome back to In This Casa, and thank you for joining me. In this episode, we're going to discuss David's final arrangements. And in this episode, I also wanted to introduce to you a very special guest, my mom, Belinda.
Hello.
It was important to me to have my mom be introduced in this particular episode when we talk about David's final arrangements, because my mom has worked in the funeral industry for decades. Right, Mom?
Close to 3 decades, at least 29 years.
Yes. And so I wanted to kind of discuss how, I guess we can start from the beginning and kind of explain to everyone, because I want to talk about David's arrangements and how we went about handling.
How we started it.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about how we handled the arrangements that week and how we planned his services. But we can't really talk about that without talking about where his arrangements began, right? So you work for
Calvary
Hill Cemetery.
It's a Catholic cemetery in Dallas.
Okay. And you've been at Calvary Hill specifically for how many years?
23 years.
Okay. But previous to that, you also worked like at Hughes Funeral Home.
For 5 years.
Okay. And what do you do at Calvary Hill? Let's start there.
So I help families that come in during a very difficult time of their lives when they lose a loved one. And, you know, we have experienced that firsthand. And so we know it's very hard. And I lost my dad when I was very young, like a little child, and my mother when I was in my early 30s. And I really believe that that was what I was meant to do.
To help families.
I was born to do that. And so you don't understand why a child would go through a loss of a father, but what better experience to have. And I don't mean it disrespectful, say experience, but you learn to have empathy for people.
Right.
And compassion.
Yeah.
But more so empathy. And that's how I started to work there. Not because I chose it. Actually, there were events that happened in my life. And, you know, you kind of hear those stories that doors shut everywhere. And the only thing that opens is this type of business or a career path. And so I think that as I've gotten older, I'll listen to sermons or people that talk about how a person becomes who they are or who they're meant to be or find their purpose in life once they experience something very traumatic. And so this is where I was led.
Yeah. So that's taking me back 30 years almost. And I'm remembering when you first started to work at Calvary Hill, and that's kind of a neat story if you want to share it. Do you mind talking about that a little bit, how you started at Calvary Hill?
Not really. I'll just kind of like briefly say some things from the beginning. I had experienced a great deal of loss, and I was really in my own personal life very lost and didn't know which way to go or what I was doing at one point. And I just seemed to, because I went through some things that are very traumatic in my life, and you know, all I can attribute all not knowing is to ignorance. And I don't mean it in a disrespectful way, but for me, for my surroundings, for people that, you know, I was around, we just didn't talk about things that could help you along the way, like we have talked for you and help you. So with those things that happened to me, I had gone to work at this company, and I just felt like it wasn't the place for me because my mother was sick and she was going to die. And I was working like every other night, every other Thursday, late throughout the night. And you girls were still young. And, you know, I lived across the street from my mom still then. And so I left that job to another job. And that other job was nice, but it was almost like too easy for me. Like,
it just wasn't stimulating enough.
No. And so I used to pick weeds from my yard because that's what women did in those time periods. That's what people did. We picked weeds instead of putting chemicals in the yards and stuff like that. So anyway, I was picking weeds one morning on a Saturday morning around 9 o'clock. Before then, but it happened that this couple was walking up the street, and it was a lady, a blonde lady, and she ended up being Charlotte Hughes with a big guy. His name was Frank Chavaria, and they talked to me about prearrangements. And I told them I thought it would be a good idea, but I just didn't even have a nickel to spend extra at that time.
Mhm.
And so before that occurrence, I didn't know that she was a daughter in law of the Hughes family.
Mhm.
And my sister Priscilla has worked at the Calvary Hill 10 years before me. And in her dealings with this funeral home,
Because
uh,
at that time, Calvary Hill was just a
it
cemetery.
was just a
They didn't
cemetery.
have a
Yeah,
funeral
they didn't
home.
have a funeral home.
Okay.
So she would ask Priscilla, if she had family. She'd ask about all the brothers and sisters, and I guess because like when you're in this kind of work, you want to service the whole family
Mhm.
because everybody needs this. It's a need for everybody.
Yeah.
And so she would ask about me, and she just, I guess God put it in her heart to ask Priscilla to let me talk to her. So for a couple of months, she had been trying to find me through Priscilla
Right.
and wasn't successful at it. Well, that day when she came walking down the street, I told her I had no, not 5 cents to spare at all. And that if
In
something,
doing pre-need arrangements, because
yeah,
that's what they were doing. They were door
yeah,
knocking,
door knocking,
going to people's houses.
talking to about prearrangement.
Okay, go ahead.
So I told her that, I guess the question she asked me, I had no idea, no response to it, but just to tell her that, I guess my sister would handle it because she works at Calvary Hill.
Mhm.
And she said, "What is your sister's name?" And I told her, Priscilla Rodriguez. And she said, "Are you Belinda?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Belinda." And she said, "Belinda, I've been looking for you for 2 months." Now, I had never met this lady.
Yeah.
I never knew her, never had seen her before. And so we visited that day about why she was looking for me. And I went to visit with her the following day.
Right.
And she wanted me in a week. And I had never done a sales job because it does require a sales job
Yeah.
when I got into it, because you would go and talk to people about why it's important to
Right.
prearrange. But after 2 years, when I was out in the community, I went into family service to work in the funeral home.
Right.
And you had to be out in the community for 2 years
Okay.
before you could work in the funeral home. And the funny thing is that, and I don't mean to like kind of jump around, sorry if I go from story to story, but
That's okay.
the funny thing is that, in doing this kind of work, like door knocking for the first 2 years, it was really kind of funny because I had given what I feel like my life to the Lord in 1994. I
Uh-huh.
gave up. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I was terribly lost,
Yeah.
terribly lost. I became a person that I didn't even know myself.
Yeah.
So, from trauma things that I went through.
Right.
Anyway, that's where I was led to do this work. But the reason why I'm saying that is because when I was door knocking, I would visit families in their home, knock on the doors with other people. And I was learning that, not to look inward so much
Yeah.
because during that grief time that I was going through, I could only see my own pain. I
Right.
couldn't see anybody else's pain.
Right.
So through this type of work,
Uh-huh.
it helped me to learn about grieving
Right.
and life unexpected things that happen.
Right.
Anyway, so with that being said, I worked at Hughes for 5 years. And then I went to work at Calvary Hill.
Because then they built a funeral home.
Well, they hadn't
Or
built
they
it
had
yet.
it yet.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, it came in like a year later. But
Okay.
when I was working there, Priscilla had her cemetery plots, and I think Ronnie had bought his, Raphael, and I wanted to be there.
And those are your brothers.
Those are my brothers.
Uh-huh.
So when the spaces that I purchased became available, I felt very fortunate because 8 of them became available.
Right.
But I only purchased 4
Four.
because I couldn't do all 8. Even though now looking back to it, I'm still okay with just doing the 4, but because of the little slope.
Yeah.
But I wish I had done the 8.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's okay. And so that's where I started. That's where I started in buying cemetery plots. And so I did that. Then I bought the lower part of the grave. And then I bought the monument when David stumbled in our life. I think I was just about done paying the monument.
Yeah. You bought it before I met him.
But
'Cause
I
I remember
didn't have
you-
it installed yet.
No, because I remember you designing it before he
Yeah.
was a part of our life.
Uh-huh.
Right.
But I had not decided yet to install it. I think it was
Correct.
paid. So anyway, I think I had later on decided to go ahead and place the monument there. And leave panels that are blank, for the names in the future. And at that point, it was two different types of memorials. One, the stand-up one with four panels for four names, and then the other one, it's a lay-down one.
And by memorial, stand-up memorial, you mean monument.
Yeah,
And
monument.
for people who, because I want people who are listening to
Mhm.
understand all of these little details about laying your loved
Mhm.
one to rest and
Yeah.
having these spaces or these
Mhm.
arrangements, and
Mhm.
they just may not understand what a
Mhm.
stand-up memorial is.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. So then the other one I have is a laid down still, like it's flat on the ground,
Mhm.
but it has for four people's name also.
Okay.
So I think around that time, then David came into our world, and then his mom passed away.
She passed away 5 months after him and I had
Yeah.
started dating.
So I helped him, and
Right.
so David learned a lot, I think, at that time about making arrangements for his mother. Like what you have to go through when you lose a loved one, as far as the decisions that have to be made,
Yeah.
and more importantly, the monies that you pay.
Yes.
So
But at the time, my swagger Lucy, she had a life insurance policy.
yeah, she did.
So David and his sister and brother were very fortunate
Fortunate.
that she had already prepared by having that life insurance
Yes,
policy. Because at
yes.
the time, you used to be able to give the funeral home the life insurance policy,
Mhm.
and they would do the
Mhm.
services and
Mhm.
plan them and execute the
Mhm.
funeral services
Mhm.
with basically a claim to this policy, and
Mhm.
they would get their money paid out before
Mhm.
you would get your money paid, like the
Right.
family.
That was the idea.
That's how it used to
Yes.
happen. And so that's what happened with David and
David's.
his siblings, but the funeral homes don't do that anymore.
No, they don't do that anymore.
Right. Okay.
So
Which I think is also, I do want to talk about David and we're getting there, but I want to point that out too,
Mhm.
because I don't think that people understand that. I think people think, oh, well, I have a life insurance policy, so I'll just use it at the time. But at the time of death now, or the time of need, funeral homes want to be paid up front.
Oh, yeah.
And you reimburse yourself
That's true.
with your policy.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I interrupted you,
all right.
and you were saying that David's mom passed away. You helped him
Mhm.
and his family navigate that at the
Mhm.
time, which was a blessing
Mhm.
to them because they didn't. I mean, really, if we hadn't been a part of their lives, they wouldn't have known
No.
what to do. And
Mm-mm.
Lucy had the life insurance, and so they
Mhm.
were able to take care of it in a way that was comfortable for
Mhm.
David, Janie, and Luis.
Mhm. And we laid her to rest very dignified.
We did.
Yeah, very loving, and everything was beautiful for her. So after that time, sometime after that, I don't remember when or what, they were going to change our discounts for employees on funeral arrangements, like the big thing. The services, the funeral home services are the larger ticket items.
Okay. And by the services, you mean like the cost for like the casket, the visitation, the actual like,
Bringing a person into their care, the director's fees, embalming fees, the hearse that carries the person to the graveside, the
that,
vault,
yeah,
everything,
everything.
everything,
Right.
flowers, the video.
Right.
So they were going to change that for us. And before they did that, I was allowed to, they offered me to buy, funerals if I wanted to for my family.
So I sorry, let me just stop
Mhm.
you one more time. So you had said earlier that you help families at the time of need. And what
Mhm.
you mean by helping is that you help them plan these services in advance and start paying on them to pay them off prior to
Yes.
actually
Yes.
losing somebody, so that they already have funerals in place.
Mhm.
And then when they lose their someone, they've already paid for these things and
Mhm.
they've locked in the price,
Mhm.
because year after year,
Mhm.
all of these things, the cost for the services, the cost for the land,
Mhm.
cost for cremation,
Mhm.
every year these costs
Goes
go
up.
up,
Mhm.
right? Okay,
Everything
so
goes
that's
up.
what you do for help.
Yes.
That's when you mean help.
And not only that, at the time of somebody's loss, if they've never prearranged or bought spots, graves,
Yeah,
then I get to help them at that time.
that as well.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So it's two different roles I
right.
play.
So they were letting you purchase pre-need
Need
funerals
which
at a
is the
discounted
bigger
rate.
item.
Right. Okay.
Yes. I mean, right now with us, like a minimal funeral package, it could be about 15,500.
And that's not including the like the burial space or the niche where you're going to put the
no,
cremains,
or opening and closing of the grave or anything. Just
opening and closing of the niche, because there's a
Yeah.
cost for that too,
Yeah,
even if
there's
you
a
just buy
cost
a
for that.
niche, right?
Mhm.
So this
Yeah.
is just the services
Just the
themselves.
services.
Okay.
So I worked it up one day, and David was sitting at the table. I don't remember where we were living.
Which house we were in?
I think it had to have been the Janwood house.
Okay.
I think. Don't remember.
Yeah.
Honestly, but I brought the dollar amounts home.
Yeah.
Well, it was after his mother died. So where were you living then?
Him and I lived in Janwood
Okay.
at the time,
Okay.
and you were on Haywick.
I was
No,
on-
no, you were on Catamore.
I was on Catamount.
Maybe
Okay.
that's why you're having a hard time remembering.
Remember, yeah.
Because you were on Catamore.
So at that time, I brought home like an estimate and what it would cost monthly for all of us, for me, for you, for Mandy, for David and Kevin,
Okay.
because I already owned at that time the 8 spaces
Okay.
and the monument.
And you had your own funeral prepaid.
No, I bought it at that time.
Okay, so you bought yours at that time. So the only thing you had at the time was the spaces,
Mhm.
which is the graves, and the monument.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at this time, my sister Amanda, who we call Mandy,
Mm-hmm.
her and Kevin already had Crossing Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was a
Mm-hmm.
solidified part of our life.
Oh,
Kevin was,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So you come
Mhm.
home.
That's my.
Were
my-
David and I engaged yet when you were planning?
No, I think you were married already.
Were we already
Yeah,
married?
That was really early into the marriage.
Okay. Because we got married like a year and a half after.
Lucy died. No.
No, we got married not a full year and a half, maybe a year and a half after we met.
Something like that.
Yeah, because we got married in March in 2012
Mhm.
and we met in July of 2010.
I really can't tell you what year it was, sweetie. I probably know it in my head, but
Yeah.
there's, some things are just like,
That's okay.
yeah, I can't remember right now, but yeah. So David said, "Holy cow, mother-in-law, you need to buy those."
Suegra.
Suegra, he said, this mother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
You need to buy those. And then, because it said how much I would pay monthly, and it was very minimal.
Mm-hmm.
So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like everything else, I like to try to pay it off fast. I can't tell you how fast I paid it off, but I can tell you that it was really a great blessing for us.
Yeah.
So that had been paid for. And then I think the last thing were the opening and closings
Okay.
of the grave. And I took care of that too. Well, now fast forward it to, I can't even, maybe a decade later.
Probably a decade later.
A decade later when David passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So all the services were paid, the services of the directors, embalming, the dressing, the visitation, flowers, everything.
Yeah.
Except for the casket and the
The
vault.
casket and the
Mhm,
vault and
yeah,
everything were
was
already
paid.
paid for, actually.
Mhm.
They were already paid for. So if you don't mind helping me remember a little bit.
Mhm.
So David died on a Saturday.
Mhm.
And then on that Monday, we went to Gainesville
Mhm.
to go pick up his belongings that Monday morning.
Mhm.
And Michelle and them were able to pick him up on Tuesday from the medical examiner
In Dallas.
in Dallas
Mhm.
because on Monday they did his exam
Mhm.
because he died over the weekend.
Mhm.
And it was late on Saturday by the
Mhm.
time they received him in Dallas. So they
Mhm.
didn't do his exam. They didn't do anything on Sunday
Yeah, until Monday.
And so they picked him up on Tuesday to
Mhm.
receive him, to take him
Bring
to
him
the
in our
care center. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we went in and talked to Michelle on Wednesday, maybe. I know.
I don't remember honestly.
I have a hard time
Mhm.
remembering the timeline.
Because we did his service on Friday and Saturday, so it had to have been Tuesday, no later than Tuesday that we went in there.
So the same day that they received him, we
Yeah,
probably
that's
had
when we
already
went.
planned to go
Mhm,
see her.
yeah.
Okay.
Because
So-
we went in the afternoon.
We did go in the
And
afternoon.
we were late. I remember I was kidding about that. How we were just like a lot of other families that
Showing up late.
Yeah, you don't mean to. It's just that.
I don't even remember why were we late? Because I don't
There's no
remember.
reason. And we're 5 minutes away. But we were late,
Right.
like 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've mentioned already in
Mhm.
previous episodes that we live a mile from
Yeah,
the cemetery. And
we were late.
okay,
Yeah.
I believe that. I just don't.
Know why?
I don't know why, and I don't. There's things I don't remember.
Yeah.
What I do remember, was it just you and I and Sara,
Mhm.
just the three of us, right?
I think so.
Because Mia was in school. Mia
No,
was
Mandy went with us.
Did Mandy go with
Yeah,
us?
Mandy went with us.
okay.
Amanda went with us.
Was she in the room with us while
She
we
was in
planned
the
and everything?
arranging room.
She
But
was,
because it got overwhelming for her too.
and she
at
walked
some
out.
point.
That's right.
Yeah, it got overwhelming.
And
for
she got
her.
up and walked out.
Mhm.
Okay, I
I
do.
don't remember what happened or what we said, but she got overwhelmed. In fact, remember I got overwhelmed too because when we walked in, they had put a nice spread.
So can we stop?
Sure.
I want to say I do want you to do that, but let's
Okay.
talk about it first for people who haven't lost
Yeah,
a loved one.
yeah.
So you lose a loved one and you have to choose a funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
and you contact the funeral home, and then the funeral director of
They send notice to our care center.
yeah, and then they go retrieve or pick up or
They
take
go.
your loved one into their care.
Yes.
And then you schedule an appointment to come in and talk to the funeral director and make all of these plans, which basically is saying picking out all the services you want and then paying for them.
And casket. And
Everything.
everything.
So that's what we had already done. We're on our way on we had already done those steps. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So on that Tuesday, we go to our appointment with Michelle. We arrive at the funeral home. And when you get there, you walk into the foyer. There's a receptionist who greets you. They call the funeral director, and the funeral director escorts you into
an arranging room.
An arrangement room, right? Okay. And in the arrangement room, that's when they talk to you about everything that is required to lay your loved one to rest, that you cannot go without,
depending,
and then
on what
options
you
as well.
want.
Well, yeah, well, but there are some things that are required. Like you have to have an outer burial container if you're going to put
you're gonna
someone
bury
in
somebody
a grave in the
the
ground.
city.
Right. So they go over these are all the requirements and these are all your options. And
Right.
and so in the middle of your grief, you have to
Yeah, you
make all
those
these decisions.
Yeah.
In
Stuff.
our case, it was different because you had already pre-planned yours and mine and Mandy's and David's and Kevin's funerals. So there was already a template that was paid for of all the services that were included. So when we got there, we walked in and you were very emotional at that point.
I didn't think I was.
Yes, you were holding it
I
together.
thought I had it held together.
But then you lost it.
When
Why?
I realized it. So what happened is when we came into the room, we sat down. Colton was in there, my coworker.
At the time, Colton was also a counselor.
A counselor like me.
Okay.
And so he was there. And when we walked in, we don't do this with families. Over the like the credenza, there was a nice spread. And
Yes.
I thought, oh my God, we walked in somebody else's
room. And by spread, you mean that they had some drinks and some snacks and things for
sandwiches
you
for
and
us.
for you and I and Mandy and Sada.
Yeah. And so when I saw that, I turned around and I told Michelle, we're in the wrong room. And Michelle just looked at me very loving. And when she did that, I broke down because I thought, oh my God, I don't have it together as much as I thought I had it together.
Yeah.
So
you were touched by the gesture that your coworkers had thought enough to provide food while we were going to be there to do the arrangements with them.
Yeah. And really, we didn't even need anything. We ended up packing it up, and they packed it up and brought it home to us.
We did.
But it was very kind of them to do that, and I just didn't expect it.
Yeah.
So, but what it did tell me was that I wasn't as put together as I thought.
Right, because you
because of
broke
what
down
I
at that moment.
Yeah. You know, because I know we don't do that. But in that moment, I didn't. I thought we were in somebody else's.
Right.
So, anyway, that was very loving for them to have done that.
So we sat down with Michelle. Michelle was the funeral director. And we sat down with her and she walked me through the contract and what all was included. And Sarah sat next to me and we talked about all the details. And I was, so very fortunate and blessed that you had taken care of that a decade ago.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to worry at that moment about the $15,000 funeral cost, plus the cost for a grave, plus the cost for a monument, a headstone, or a flat stone, or any of those things. And it gave me the freedom and the ability and the luxury to kind of curate David's funeral and make it bespoke to him. I could, because his casket, you had picked a beautiful casket that was metal for all 5 of our funerals that you pre-purchased. But I upgraded David's casket to a beautiful wood casket that I thought was more befitting of my husband. And I also was able to upgrade his vault. And I think I also upgraded the flower spray that was going to go on his casket and
2 side easels.
And 2 easels for the side because I wanted to make sure he had lots of flowers, which I didn't even need to because David was so loved. I mean, he had lots of people sent flowers. He had an abundance of flowers. Did you take any pictures of his flowers? Okay, because I didn't do anything to document any of the.
Oh, you mean inside the chapel?
Yes,
I
like
think so.
in his
Yeah,
visitation,
I
like
think so.
all the
Yeah.
flowers that were.
I think I have it on my phone.
Yeah, I for sure didn't take any picture or document anything. I was very focused
Mhm.
on just trying to get through
Mhm.
those few days. So for us, our services for David included so on Tuesday we planned with Michelle, which you're right, it must have been Tuesday
Mhm.
because Thursday we did our private visitation with
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
Just us,
Mhm.
his siblings and
Mhm.
nephews,
Mhm.
and me and my siblings
Mhm.
and parents and nephews.
Mhm.
And that was Thursday. And then Friday, we had the
Mhm.
rosary and visitation
Mhm.
where people got to actually come see
Mhm.
him one last
Mhm.
time and pay respects to him.
Mhm.
And we did a full rosary in honor of my sister in law,
Mhm.
who's Catholic, and she wanted to do that for him. So we
Mhm.
did. And that's when I gave his eulogy.
Mhm.
And then the next day is when we laid him to rest. And when we laid him to rest, he was being laid to rest graveside in
Mhm.
the spaces that you had purchased
Mhm.
years and years before.
Mhm. I started buying those spaces in 2002.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So 20 years before.
Yeah.
And we didn't do a procession.
Mhm.
Instead, what we did was, well, we did do a procession. We did our own personal one.
Mhm.
So we only, that morning, we left the funeral home
Mhm.
with David. They put his casket into the coach or hearse. People
Mhm.
more commonly
Mhm.
know it as a
Mhm.
hearse. And then we got into the limo, you and me and my girls and my sister in law,
Mhm.
right? My sister in
Mhm.
law too. And the five of us followed the coach and we drove him here
Mhm.
home
Mhm.
to the house because David had died outside of Gainesville.
Mhm.
And when he died, they took him to the medical examiners.
Mhm.
And then from the medical examiners, he went to the care center and then to the funeral home, but he'd not been home
Mhm.
yet.
Mhm.
So we drove him home.
Mhm.
And then we stayed here for a minute, gave his spirit
Mhm.
and soul a chance to
Mhm.
make it home.
Mhm.
And then we drove to back to the cemetery grounds,
Mhm.
to the North Chapel, to the main
Mhm.
chapel.
Mhm.
And we had his mass. And
Mhm.
we did a Catholic mass
Mhm.
again in honor of my
Mhm.
sister in law,
Mhm.
followed by his graveside
Mhm.
service.
Mhm.
And everybody just walked,
Mhm.
followed the coach
To the
to the
graveside.
graveside
Mhm.
because your spaces are very, very close
Yes.
to the chapel.
Mhm.
And then we had the graveside services, and then we laid him to rest. And earlier you were gesturing at that picture that William gave me, David's
Mhm.
friend,
Mhm.
which is a picture of me standing at David's grave after we'd already placed him there that same day, the day of
Mhm.
his burial,
Mhm.
and all his flowers were placed on top of him.
Mhm.
And I think everybody had already started to really walk off, and I was
Mhm.
still standing there with
Mhm.
my husband.
Mhm.
And William very sweetly took a picture of me
Mhm.
there looking at my husband.
Mhm.
And, that also is something that I've mentioned to lots of people in regards to that particular picture who've
Mhm.
seen it because it's a beautiful picture that William
Mhm.
took. And I'm so grateful
Mhm.
he dropped it off to me on my porch on David's birthday.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful that he
Mhm.
did that. But when people see it, it looks like a movie
Mhm.
because it's me
Mhm.
in the clothes that I'm wearing the day that I laid my husband to rest,
Mhm.
looking at his grave, which is covered in all the flowers that people
Mhm.
sent him, which
Mhm.
was beautiful,
Mhm.
the outpouring of flowers and love that he
Mhm.
received, that we
Mhm.
received. But you had purchased that monument 20
Mhm.
years previously.
Mhm.
So our monument was already up.
Mhm.
And that's not something that's typical.
Mm-mm.
Typical, if people don't have their services planned,
If there's no arrangements.
if there's no
Mhm.
arrangements ahead of time.
Mhm. I mean, eventually it might look like that, but in that
Right, but not
moment.
at the moment. Right.
Mm-mm.
So for us, it was almost,
Mhm.
it was very surreal
Mhm.
and it was almost entirely too perfect, which is
Mhm.
exactly what I
I
wanted
know,
for
I
my
know,
husband,
yeah.
but it was because even graveside, when we went graveside and I sat there in that front row in front of my husband's casket, while he was on the mechanisms that lower him down into the vault, the monument was there. And
Mhm.
that's what it looks like in the movies,
Mhm.
so people have an expectation
Mhm.
that that's what it's going to look like. But if you
Mhm.
don't have those things
Mm-mm.
arranged ahead of time and
Mm-mm.
existing, it's not.
Mm-mm.
So if we didn't have those things the day that we made arrangements and
Mhm.
that we went in and Michelle walked me through everything, we would have also had to get in the car and drive out into the cemetery and look at spaces
Mhm.
and pick a garden in the
Mhm.
cemetery, pick a
Mhm.
space in a garden in the cemetery. And that space would just be a piece of grass,
Mhm.
and it would be opened up, but there would be no stone or anything there.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So the day that we laid him to rest on Saturday, when
Mhm.
they put the dirt
Mhm.
on him and put his flowers on him, if we didn't have those things, it would have just been a mound of flowers,
Mhm.
kind of
Yes.
with nothing around it.
Mhm.
And I'm just bringing it up so that people can
No,
understand.
and that's a good point because so many people come in because the cemetery has to maintain cleanliness.
Yeah.
After 3 days, they remove all those flowers
And
and
then
they
they
have to
take all the
trash it.
flowers off,
Mhm.
right?
And so many people come in and complain about it. They're surprised that
Mhm.
the flowers are not there, but for months it's without anything because the grave is without anything
Without
because we
anything.
continuously clean it.
Right.
If they allow you to leave something on the gravesite before your marker or your monument or your memorial
Mhm.
is placed, they will allow you to. They won't disturb it like a week before a special day and a week after.
And by special day, you mean like a holiday,
Holiday,
like a
yeah.
national holiday, not like
Mother's Day, Father's
right,
Day.
right. Like a special day coming up for me is my husband and I's wedding anniversary,
Yeah, but
but the cemetery doesn't know that.
they don't know.
So if I
We would never clean up if that happened.
right,
Yeah.
but if right,
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
everybody got to be considered
Yeah.
that way, yeah, the
We never.
cemetery would never be
Yeah,
clean.
it would never be clean.
Right. So it's important that people
Mhm.
understand that
Yeah.
the cemetery has policies on how they do it
Yeah.
because it's surprising to people. Like that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to bring it up because to your point, it's surprising to
Yeah.
people because yeah, you come back a few days later because like me, I go see
Mhm.
my husband almost every day, and
Mhm.
especially
Mhm.
right after I placed him, I went every
I
day
know,
for
honey.
months,
Yeah.
rain or shine. I went
Yeah.
every
I know.
sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah, I know.
And if I wasn't already aware of that because my
Mhm.
mom and my family have been in the
Mhm.
industry for
Mhm.
years, then I might have been shocked on that
Mhm.
fourth day
Oh yeah.
to get there with no monument if David didn't
Mm-mm.
have one,
Mm-mm.
and all the flowers are gone, and I'm
Mhm.
just looking at a rectangle of dirt.
Yeah, just
And that's
it's
traumatizing,
traumatizing.
because you don't expect it,
Mhm.
because people
Yeah.
just don't know.
No, they don't know.
Because we don't talk about stuff like
We
this.
should.
I know, but why?
I think that as a young person, only in my experience before my mom passed away, I must have been 33. I must have just gotten divorced with your dad, or I was about to be divorced with him. Mother was already having strokes. And so I went with Priscilla to the funeral home because she'd already had the plots for mom to be there.
Mhm.
And I hated Ronald Hughes. I mean, I love him. He's such a dear friend of mine. But in that moment, I was like, she wants to kill mother. She wishes mother was dead. Blah blah blah. All the terrible
When
things.
she was planning ahead of time.
Well, it is, and it
Yeah,
is
but you
all.
didn't understand it.
Well, nobody wants to go there,
Yeah.
and especially when you lose a loved one already. I don't remember the pain that I felt for my dad.
Yeah.
I do remember the pain I felt when I grieved him at 34 years of age
Right.
after not knowing.
29 years later.
Yeah,
Right.
not knowing what it even was. But
So you were upset at Ronald
oh
Hughes
yeah,
because
yeah,
y'all went in
yeah. We
to
went in there to do the arrangements. And Ronald Hughes had nothing to do with that.
yeah.
What happens, honey, is when people or young people have never had a loss and they have their parents and they have their grandparents, they don't want to even entertain that.
The conversation.
No.
Yeah.
And it's understandable. Who would want to do that?
Right.
You love your mother so much. You can't even imagine your mother not being on this earth without.
Right. But at the time, Priscilla had the right idea.
She did, but nobody paid attention to her.
Oh,
They
no,
didn't.
I understand.
So,
Which is
not
still today,
yeah,
people still don't pay attention to that,
yeah,
right?
yeah. The people don't. They unless they experience it, it almost opens your eyes to a different
Yeah.
realm.
Mhm.
Unless you've experienced that loss or that grief.
Mhm.
And I think it's a normal process. We just don't. We hate to go through that. Who wants to go through that? But we have to experience it. We have to be prepared for it because we prepare for so many other things, like your home.
Yeah.
Like your homes that you've got here. You and
Yeah.
your sister. You got 3 houses.
Yeah.
Gosh, and if you think about it, 10 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, y'all would always say about not it being a forever home. And I was like, yes, yes, because not saying that you have to live here. You could always go venture out. I did it,
Mhm.
but I always kept my little house.
Mhm.
And you don't know what the future holds.
Mhm.
So that was the only reason why I would say that. Not because I didn't think you guys should not, go and explore in your life. just from experience prior. So that's the things that I try to share with people
Mhm.
about why it's important and you should take care of it. And I'm going to go a little further right now to say another little thing because if one person passed away today and you did everything minimal at Calvary Hill, it's going to
Mhm.
cost you like $26,000
Mhm.
that you got to
Minimal.
come up with in the next,
Immediately.
yeah, next 3, 4 days.
While you're grieving the
Well,
loss
yeah,
of your loved one.
especially if it's unexpected.
Right.
So it's to prepare this stuff so that the other generation doesn't have to do that. It's a very loving thing to do for your family, I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
My of course I'm a little unique because all my drive has always been my kids,
Yeah.
my my Mandy and my Maria,
Mhm.
all my life
Yeah.
to right now. You know that you guys have been why I have done things. You
Yeah.
know, and so you now going through the experience. Thank God that we have been able to do it. That there's a sacrifice
Yeah.
that somebody has to make. You're
Yeah.
either going to make it before.
Monetarily, you mean to pay
Yeah,
for these things.
sure. Yeah, you're gonna pay it before or you're gonna pay it at that time.
Right, but you don't
And
you
I
can't
hate to
avoid it.
say it like that
No, I
because,
know.
people say, oh, pay me now or pay me later. And you can't say that.
Right. But that's
It just be
important.
disrespectful.
It is. And it's important that people understand because I've heard people say things actually the day that okay, so I had to go to the medical examiner's office to request
The
his report.
hmm
Why did I have to do that?
for the
For
insurance.
the yeah, okay, for the life insurance.
Mhm.
So by myself, I got up one morning, got myself dressed, and I drove, I mapped it, and I went down to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's
Mhm.
building. And I walked into that sterile building,
Mhm.
which has a empty foyer with a
Mhm.
couple of benches,
Yeah.
a glass little room where you see a
Mhm.
couple of officers,
Mhm.
security
Mhm.
guards that are just sitting there watching.
Mhm.
And there's a little glass window and you go and you take a ticket, push a button, and when they call you, you tell them what you're there for and
Mhm.
you don't know, right? Because you're
Mhm.
like, I
You've
think I
never
have to
been
get a
there.
report. I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm
Mhm.
supposed to ask for,
Mhm. Yeah.
And they say, okay, this is what you need, blah, 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 fill this out. So I sat down to fill out the paperwork to ask for the report
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
requested or whatever.
Mhm.
And there was a man and a woman sitting next to me.
Mhm.
And they were talking, and the man, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I was sitting there by myself
Mhm.
and I was
Yeah, it's
waiting.
not hard to do. Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't remember what she said to him, but I remember him saying to her, well, if they want to charge that much, I'll just put the casket in the back of my truck and go bury it myself on our land. And I think a lot of people say things like that, but they don't understand that that's not a possibility.
I mean, because you can take your loved one in a truck,
Okay.
put them in your back of your pickup. People do that, taking your loved ones to Mexico.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. And the funeral home is done, but I think there's some kind of legal documents probably that
Well, because you
people
have
have
to
to
have
sign.
like
Yeah.
documentation of where they
And the
laid them,
container,
right? Or
the casket has to be like wrapped in a certain box, and in a tray they call it. So
mhm.
I mean, I think there's different things, but you could if you wanted to, I suppose.
But could you do that here in the United
I
States?
don't know.
Take
Yeah,
your
don't
the
know. Could
body
you
and
could if that you had land and if you wanted to open the ground and put your loved one there. I
and
think you can.
and I think okay, so right, and that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
But the way that you're saying it is still
Mhm.
not the way that that man meant it.
Yeah, I know. He was
He
just being sarcastic.
he was being
Yeah,
sarcastic and
because of
saying
the
because he didn't
cost of
want to pay
things.
for anything. Because
Mhm.
even those things that you're telling me
Mhm.
that you could do to do
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
I'm sure there's a cost
yeah.
associated
Sure,
with
I'm
all
sure.
of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Because I've had people before say, okay, so I just want to bury my loved one, and I don't really need a funeral home. I just want to bury them. You do need a funeral home. Who's going to pick up your body?
Yeah.
So people just don't
They just
know.
don't
They
know.
really don't know. I don't think that they're being like really, really. You just have to overlook those things because a lot of times they just don't know,
Yeah.
or they don't have the money. I mean, that's during the times that you lose a loved one, it's so hard. And you hear so many things out in the world that they say, funeral homes will do this to you, funeral homes won't do anything to you
Right.
because they're all governed, first of all.
Well, you see things in the
Yeah.
news, but I think what happens is the news always shows the worst of the worst. That's
Yeah.
the point of the
Yeah.
news. Like
Yeah.
if the news reported on the best of the best, there's not really it's not interesting.
No, I know it.
So and then that
Yeah.
scares people.
Yeah, but they don't do anything. Here's the thing. Let's say that, for example, like in your case with David, I had bought a moderate casket.
Mhm.
and you upgraded.
I did.
And Michelle didn't tell you, no, Maria, don't upgrade it
No, she
because
didn't.
it's sufficient. But look at your face.
Yeah.
Had she have said that,
Yeah.
you would have thought, you don't tell me what I can spend for my husband. So how would a person feel like you felt it just talking here, you and I? But if you're at the funeral home and they're telling you don't buy that casket because it's this one's better, it's not that much, and that one is $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, how dare you say that to me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a catch 22.
Yeah.
So the funeral directors can't tell them.
I
I
understand.
mean, they're not going to stop the family and say, no, 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 don't do it. But because it's a very vulnerable time for
It is.
people,
It is.
they feel like they're taking advantage of it. And they're
Right.
not.
No.
It's just that there's
And also, I think people maybe make emotional decisions that maybe
Yeah,
after the
sure.
fact they
Yeah.
regret, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
easier to blame that on
Somebody else. Yeah,
somebody
of
made me
course.
do that or tricked me
Yeah,
into it instead of
yeah.
I chose that $10,000
Yeah,
casket.
yeah.
But no, I mean, the casket wasn't $10,000.
No, I know. I'm
but
not saying
I,
it
yeah,
was. I'm just
yeah,
saying that.
yeah. But I,
that
no, I chose to upgrade that
Yeah,
for my husband.
exactly.
Yeah,
But my point is that you chose it.
right, right. The funeral homes aren't doing those things to people,
No.
right?
They're not doing it. It's just very difficult in that time.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very sensitive
Yeah,
time in
yeah.
people's life. And so
I mean, I think it would be
Yeah.
easier on all of the people who work in the funeral industry if just people were more educated about all of these
Yeah.
things. Because
Oh, the
since it's
consumer, you mean?
the consumer,
Yeah.
because the consumer doesn't understand all of these
Mhm.
things,
Yeah.
and then they come in emotional and an
Mhm.
emotional time talking
Yeah,
about money,
yeah.
and then it's not what they think it is. And so if they had more understanding of the process and the details and stuff, then maybe it wouldn't be as much of a shock, and it would make the whole process easier on grieving consumers.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So I think that you have a very unique perspective that I kind of wanted to talk about
Okay.
because of the fact that you've worked in the industry for so long and you've helped so many families lay their loved ones to rest for years and years and years. You mentioned that really we only have lost grandma
Mhm.
previously. I mean, you lost your dad, but you were 5. Then we lost grandma. You were 34? No,
36.
36. Yeah, because I was 17.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, you lost a cousin and a nephew,
Mhm.
but not that you weren't close to them, but they weren't a part of everyday life
Mhm.
until we lost
Mhm.
David,
Mhm.
right? Which was unexpected for
Mhm.
the whole family,
Mhm.
but specifically a different perspective for you, or not
Mhm.
perspective, but a different situation for you because you lived with us and had been living with us for years
Mhm.
at the time of losing him. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on how all that process went as you being the family and not being the counselor
Mhm.
and part of the team.
Mhm.
Instead, you were part of the family.
Mhm. You know, I just, I can't really say how important it is, to have had all this stuff taken care of. And I'm not just pushing it because, and I'm not trying to not answer your question. I'm going to get to it.
Okay.
But I think about you specifically, and maybe it was a luxury for you and David that I had these arrangements made, so therefore you could protect yourself with life insurances and not have those added costs or fees associated with protecting yourself. Because I'm a big believer that you have to, rather you should have life insurance.
Right.
But while you're paying you have your life insurance,
You should also have.
also buy your spaces because
Yeah.
and your funeral service, because two things can happen, I think, in life.
Mm-hmm.
You can outlive the insurance policies.
That's true.
For one, and not have any protection, nothing arranged, no property, no funerals, and then somebody has to pay it for you. So now
Right.
you're looking at 50 years later,
Mm-hmm.
and that 65-year-old kid of yours or 70-year-old kid of yours is going to pay.
Is responsible for that cost.
It is.
Yeah.
And so, more importantly, also with the life insurance part, is that you never know how the person's going to grieve
Yeah.
and how long it takes them to function again.
Right.
And
You're talking about me.
yes, I am talking about you because I think that after my mom died, I had to function.
Mhm.
I mean, I did mine totally leap of faith with God,
Mhm.
and it worked out for me. I can't even remember how I paid bills or anything,
Yeah.
but and I didn't have a life insurance policy.
Mhm.
My mother didn't have one for me, to have blessed me with one or anything,
Mhm.
and I didn't have to pay her. I contributed to the cost of her arrangements, but that's why I think that if you could arrange everything and not go out and buy it today and have $50,000 like a car, 50,000,
Yeah.
pay it in increments of 5 years.
Yeah.
Give yourself that time period, kind of like a house. You got it 30 years,
Yeah.
note maybe, or 25 years or 15 years. It would do the same with this because I would. That's what I did.
Mhm.
I think I paid for like 18 years, 17
Yeah,
years
buying piece after piece after
after, yeah,
piece.
piece after piece after piece.
Right. And
And
even now we're still doing that
yeah,
because after
because,
we
yeah,
lost David, we did
the funeral
the
services
funerals
for
for
the
all the
kids.
kids, for all your
Yeah, for my
grandkids,
grandkids.
your 4
Mhm.
grandkids. And then
And then
you
we even after that.
did the away from home protections because Cross was going to Japan and
Yes.
you realized that they didn't all have it.
Yes. And even after that, there was
Mhm.
no more room for me
Right.
at the burials
Right. Right. So
because the kids
your 4
want,
spaces,
yeah,
at some point you purchased rights to make them double depth
right.
graves. So your
Hmm.
4 turned into 8.
Yes.
But we are 9. Your little
Yes.
family,
Is
your
nine.
daughters and son-in-laws and grandkids were 9.
Yeah.
So we don't have enough spaces for everyone. So recently we just purchased a mausoleum space. So that way we actually are +1.
Yeah, we're +1
We
right
have
now.
10 spaces now.
Yeah.
Right.
But here's the thing, because people can look at it and say, well, you don't know if your kids or grandkids are going to be buried there. You don't know.
Right.
You have no idea. Fast forward at 30 years, let's say 40 years. You don't know the circumstances of that kid or
Right.
that person. You don't know that the funeral services now are going to cost so much money that they don't even have a place. The cremation may be very expensive too. You have
Right.
no idea. You don't know that kid's not going to be buried there.
No, we don't
You
know.
don't.
Yeah.
Even the wife. You don't that the wife is going to be young and think she might want to remarry again or something. You have no clue.
Yeah, we don't know.
So, and even if they don't, guess what? It's always there. And then
Yeah.
you don't know that they don't have kids and maybe need a space one day.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
It's
you never
my
know.
family, and that's what I chose for my family. And if my grandsons don't get buried there, but their kids do or something, it's okay. That's what it's for.
Right.
I don't want it ever sold to anybody.
Right.
Nobody can sell it.
No.
It's for whoever needs it.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So, but again, I go back. She thinks we're fighting.
She does.
Yeah. So I think
Don't
that
raise your voice at me.
I didn't mean
I'm
to
just
raise
no,
it.
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah,
Mom.
but
You're
I just
okay.
think
You're okay
that
there.
it just depends on how you want to handle it. Everybody handles their business different,
Right.
but I can tell you that it made it easy for you.
Right. That's
You're
what I
very
was going to circle
fortunate.
back to
Yeah.
that because
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
more importantly I want to talk about that. But I did want this conversation to center very much around the
The arrangements,
arrangements.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
arrangements and
Yeah.
how beneficial that
Mhm.
was and how it
Mhm.
impacted our situation
Mhm.
it was a blessing.
Mhm.
It took a big burden off of the whole
Mhm. All of
process.
us. Yeah, nobody had to worry about it.
Right.
The financial part of it.
Right. It was kind of just like walking in and just
Mhm.
planning details is
Mhm.
what it felt like.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
saying, okay, yeah, I do want to pay a little extra for this or that,
Yes,
you know?
you had the choice to do
I
it.
had the choice to do it. But I want to circle back to my question because what I asked you was what it was like for you being on the opposite side of this
Oh gosh, it was
situation.
terrible. I mean, I guess I paused earlier because it's not an easy task to go through, or even take your mind back to a very painful memory.
Yeah.
And that was painful for me. And I think that I told you that, I shared that with you before that I mean, I felt like I was lost because I felt sad that I'm on this side of that table and I have sat on the opposite side for so many years. And now I'm sitting there doing the same thing that every one of my families that I've helped have sat there and gone through. And I hope that I didn't ever make them feel like we didn't care or we were rushing. And I think that the way I treat my family since then, I think that there's a greater love for them and an empathy for the people and compassion that I get a very loving feedback from them.
Mhm.
And I think that's what I'm displaying to them because that taught me to be different with the families.
Yeah.
If I wasn't,
Before,
yeah,
right,
I
right,
don't think I was, but
right.
if I had any other, I don't know, not thoughts or whatever, maybe, yeah.
Considering
Hmm.
it brought that to light for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That every person that I sit with now, I feel their pain
Yeah.
because that's one of my sons, I feel like, that
Yeah.
passed away. And I thought David was going to be here forever. He told me that I could live off of him.
He did.
No, and he took off. He just like, I didn't even get a chance to live off of him.
That's
You know,
true.
because he would tell me, so I gotta come live over here with us. And I would
Mhm.
tell him, okay, I'm going, but I'm gonna live off of you. You
Yeah.
know, and he would say, well, come on. And we never got to that point, but who knows why, you know. I'm the same way. I think I can more so now. I don't even know what to call it, Mija, because I'm in that boat. And I always put myself in a boat.
Mhm.
Well, I'm in that same boat with the people that come in and have lost their loved ones,
Mhm.
you know. I don't know how to call it or how to say it, but it's not an easy task. I can tell you that.
Well, he did have a beautiful funeral.
Yes, he did have a beautiful funeral.
His services were beautiful.
Yeah.
And
Even everything, how we walked in church, even that was just beautiful.
yeah.
You know, like when we were all together, and that was very special. So,
And
yeah.
I want to thank you for
Hmm.
having all of that,
Yeah, you're welcome.
to having the foresight to
Hmm.
taking care of all that, because
Hmm.
I don't know how I would have
Hmm.
managed
Hmm.
that on top of
Yeah,
everything else.
and even and it's even go further, Mita. David's wasn't like a big, like we didn't. It wasn't a showy thing.
No,
You were honoring him,
right.
but you weren't like showing off. Hey, look at us. Hey, look at this. It was just so beautiful, you know, like very loving thing to do for your husband.
Yeah.
And if a family doesn't want to do that, if they want to do just the one day, come in a couple of hours and view their loved one and bury them, that would
That's
be
okay
okay too.
too. Yeah.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
Because even if they do an immediate burial,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
fine
immediate
too.
burial is okay.
Right.
Even that costs you thousands of dollars.
Right.
And one could be $6,000 or like a $5,500 range to $26,000 range.
Yeah.
You know, just
But
depending on
I
what you
needed
pick.
3 days with my
I
husband.
know you did.
I needed that.
Oh,
I
I knew
stood
it.
there
Yeah,
every moment somebody wasn't with
I
him
know.
and held his
I
hand.
know.
I
I
needed
know you
every
did.
moment.
I know you did, sweetie.
So,
I know. And that's when we made arrangements. I told Michelle, I've got to have that day, that half a day with her.
yeah,
Because you hadn't seen him.
I hadn't seen
And he
him.
had died, you know, and we had not seen him. And the family, you guys were all like that. And yeah, you had to be with David that day before you gathered with everybody else.
Yes.
Because see, and the thing is, that's not really done a lot right now, but I know my family.
Yeah.
I lived with y'all day in and day out, day in and day out. And so I knew that my family needed to see him, to be with him like that.
Right.
Kevin, the boys, you, Mandy, your girls, Janie,
Mm-hmm. Janie,
her family,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You hadn't had
We had yeah, a
no,
chance to say goodbye to him. Or,
no, yeah.
yeah.
And myself too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that for me, you know, I do miss my son-in-law and I do grieve him, but I think for me is that there's still that reality that I know people have to leave.
Yeah.
I have to leave. You have to leave.
Yeah.
You know, do we like it? No, you know, but I don't know, Mija. I think the thing is to make it as easy as you can for your loved one that has to stay behind.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know what the next world is. I wish I did. I just kind of like hope and believe and have faith, you know, in Christ and that he gets us there to the next one.
Yeah.
However we get there, you know, but
Yeah.
you know, we have to have faith that we're going to see our loved ones again.
I
I
do.
think so. I think God is such a great father, you know, so
Yeah.
I think so.
So,
believe
how do
so.
you feel about our current reality? Me and you and
Oh,
Raven,
yeah, me and you, Raven, Sarah, and
Sada
Mia.
and Mia. Yeah. Although the girls, so Sada lives with us, but she's in
Mhm.
school right
I
now.
know.
So she's been in
Yeah,
California the
yeah.
majority of
Since
these 7
David.
months since he's
Mhm.
passed.
Yeah,
And Mia doesn't live with us, but she's over here a lot. But she
Yeah.
doesn't technically live
yeah,
in
with us.
in our home.
Mhm.
So how do you feel about our new normal?
I really hate it,
Yeah, me
actually.
too.
I hate it, but we've been through some very dark places years ago when you were right, very young and when I was very young.
Yeah.
And we know that you have to keep going
Yeah.
day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
What we do better now is that we know that we could have counseling,
Yeah.
talk to somebody,
Right.
go to prayer groups, go to church.
Yeah.
So many different avenues,
Mhm.
positive ones that help.
Right.
And so at least we seek that out,
Right.
not like what we
Before.
experienced before.
Yeah.
So I think that helps us a lot. I think that if we survive it is because we do have hope, even if it's just like a little mustard seed. It's there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't get up every day and try.
Yeah.
And David would want us to get up every day and try.
I know.
He did it after he lost his mother
And his brother.
and his brother,
Yeah.
and
He did.
he wouldn't want us to fall, and that we're just talking about getting up, doing the things in life that we're supposed to go to work, go to dinner, enjoy the pool. He would say that. Have the yard clean, Svegna. Let's get out there. You know what I'm saying? There are so many things that this was his haven.
Yeah.
And even
His
though,
home.
and even
Yeah.
though he's not physically here, we still have to honor him and go in that pool. Last year we just looked at it. After he passed, nobody wanted to even get in there, and we still had heat. It was still hot all the month of September, and we didn't because we couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could this year either.
Yeah. I don't know.
But I think that everybody tries because of him.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, everybody tries because of him. Kevin still, got up. Kevin tries to be a better dad because of David.
Yeah.
You get up every day and because of David.
Yeah.
I'm the same way
Mhm.
because of David, but you know what I'm saying. I
Mhm.
mean, the girls know they had to do that. Sarah had to go back to school because
Yeah.
of her daddy.
Yeah.
So there are things that David still left inside of all of us.
Yeah.
Because of who he was. And he wouldn't want us to lose it, or to get like it was the end of the world.
No, he wouldn't. I think about that sometimes though. I think
Yeah.
when I'm struggling
Mhm.
and I know that I need to get up, and I
Yeah.
know I need to keep going, which I do every day.
Yeah.
Every day I do.
Yeah. It's a new life right now.
Yeah.
It's new, mija, but it's a balanced life still.
What
We
is-
have balance. We're not unbalanced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Because when there's separation, whether I think of loss of a loved one or even in my case was a divorce, you
Mhm.
get so unbalanced. And right now we have continued with stability.
Yes. we have.
So I think because we all lean on each other. It's been a group thing, and even like the church stuff that you guys and
Grief counseling,
grief,
the group
counseling,
grief
yeah,
counseling
all
we
of
did.
it,
Yeah. I
but-
haven't talked a lot about that. I don't know if I've mentioned it in a previous episode. Maybe I have.
Yeah.
That me and Sarah and Kevin were doing that.
Yeah.
But I do want to spend an episode talking about all of that stuff, all of the
Things that y'all
therapy and the counseling,
Mhm.
and even the therapy that like continuing to do.
Mhm.
And like I saw Nancy yesterday morning,
Mhm. Yeah.
who is my therapist or our
Mhm.
family
Yeah.
therapist, and she also kind of said what you're saying right now, which is like because
Mhm.
I don't think I'm doing. I don't really know how I was doing the
Mhm.
first couple of weeks after he passed
Mhm.
away.
Mhm.
I wasn't in a position where I could be aware
Yeah.
of how I was doing. Pushed forward and I
Mhm.
was doing what seemed okay,
Mhm.
And I think I've kind of regressed right now in a way.
Oh, honey's very special days coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's to be expected.
Yeah. Our wedding anniversary is coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was talking to Nancy about how I'm feeling.
Mhm.
And she said kind of what you're saying. She kind of said something, I guess, where I kind of asked her, like, not how she thought I was doing, but just kind of, and she said, she said, because, I mean, we did discuss some courses of action and things like that, but she did say, at the most part, like, you're still in the fight
Mhm.
and you're staying pretty stable, pretty much is what she was saying. So she's like, as long as I can see that you're still staying stable and you're still in the game, whatever little fight you still have in you, you're throwing it in there. There's hope. Oh, you're okay. We're doing
Yeah,
okay right
yeah.
now.
Yeah. And that may be because I'm here too.
Maybe.
And I have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And even with Mandy
I'm
and
sure.
Kevin, I'm sure that if I saw something, I'd kind of like want to step in. But more so than that,
Mhm.
that's something that you have to learn and Mandy has to learn.
Right. Well,
Because
go ahead.
one day,
Uh-huh.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
we will experience a loss. It could be me, it
Yeah.
could be Mandy, could be Kevin, it could, I would, God forbid, it would be the kids. But
Yeah.
and you have to provide that for each other.
Right.
Get it? You can get lost when you have that severe pain.
Yes, but what I was gonna say is that Mandy and I saw you persevere through a divorce and through the loss of your mom. And so that example is now what I'm trying to do for my kids with the
Exactly.
loss of my husband.
Yes.
And so you learn that strength and that having the fight
Yes.
still in you to try.
Yes.
And then hopefully my girls will learn it from me
Yeah, yeah.
and my nephews and my sister, and because we will like you're saying, we'll continue to people we're inevitably going to lose
somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's just reality.
But because of those things that we have to go through, it's not like a May or we're going to.
Yeah.
That's why rearrangement
Right.
is
That's
so
right.
And it's not. I'm not doing a sales technique or tie,
No.
but it's like if somebody experiences, they'll know.
Yeah, they'll
When they go
understand.
through it, when they go through it,
Right,
because they will go
because
through
everybody
it.
will,
Everybody
and
will.
everybody has to pay something, manage
Yeah.
loss of somebody
Yeah.
and their final arrangements. And question is what that experience ends up being like for that individual, because whether or
Exactly.
not they were prepared, as prepared as you can be.
As you can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, I want to thank you
yeah, thanks.
for joining me today. Mom, you could always come back and we could talk more about yourself, but you don't have to.
Not today.
Well, not today.
Another day.
Another time.
Okay.
Another
it would
time.
be fun.
You want to come back and
Yeah, I'll come back to
sit with us?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
We're going to say bye for today, but our listeners and our watchers can join me here next Saturday and we can continue to talk about what it's like in my casa. And if they're interested in talking about what it's like in their casa with me, they can send me an email.
Absolutely.
Until then, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.